Matthew Henry's Commentary on the Whole Bible. Judges 17. All agree that what is related in this and the rest of the chapters to the end of this book was not done, as the narrative occurs, after Samson, but long before, even soon after the death of Joshua, in the days of Phinehas the son of Eleazar, chapter 20 verse 28. But it is cast here into the latter part of the book that it might not interrupt the history of the judges. That it might appear how happy the nation was in the judges, it is here shown how unhappy they were when there was none. 1. Then idolatry began in the family of Micah, chapter 17. 2. Then it spread itself into the tribe of Dan, chapter 18. 3. Then villainy was committed in Gibeah of Benjamin, chapter 19. 4. Then that whole tribe was destroyed for countenancing it, chapter 20. 5. Then strange expedients were adopted to keep up that tribe, chapter 21. Therefore blessed be God for the government we are under. In this chapter we are told how Micah an Ephraimite furnished himself, 1. With an image for his God, verses 1 to 6. 2. With a Levite, such a one as he was, for his priest, verses 7 to 13. Micah and his gods, 1406 BC. 1. And there was a man of Mount Ephraim, whose name was Micah 2, and he said unto his mother, The 1100 shekels of silver that were taken from thee, about which thou cursedst, and spakest of also in mine ears, behold, the silver is with me, I took it. And his mother said, Blessed be thou of the Lord, my son. 3. And when he had restored the 1100 shekels of silver to his mother said, I had wholly dedicated the silver unto the Lord from my hand for my son, to make a graven image, and a molten image. Now therefore, I will restore it unto thee. For yet he restored the money unto his mother, and his mother took 200 shekels of silver, and gave them to the founder, who made thereof a graven image, and a molten image, and they were in the house of Micah 5, and the man Micah had a house of gods, and made an ephod, and teraphim, and consecrated one of his sons, who became his priest. 6. In those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Here we have 1. Micah and his mother quarreling. 1. The son robs the mother. The old woman had hoarded, with long scraping and saving, a great sum of money, 1,100 pieces of silver. It is likely she intended, when she died, to leave it to her son. In the meantime it did her good to look upon it, and to count it over. The young man had a family of children grown up, for he had one of age to be a priest, verse 5. He knows where to find his mother's cash, thinks he has more need of it than she has, cannot stay till she dies, and so takes it away privately for his own use. Though it is a fault in parents to withhold from their children that which is meet, and lead them into temptation to wish them in their graves, yet even this will by no means excuse the wickedness of those children that steal from their parents, and think all their own that they can get from them, though by the most indirect methods. 2. The mother curses the son, or whoever had taken her money. It should seem she suspected her son, for, when she cursed, she spoke in his ears so loud, and with so much passion and vehemence, as made both his ears to tingle. See what mischief the love of money makes, how it destroys the duty and comfort of every relation. It was the love of money that made Micah so undutiful to his mother as to rob her, and made her so unkind and void of natural affection to her son as to curse him if he had it and concealed it. Outward losses drive good people to their prayers, but bad people to their curses. This woman's silver was her god before it was made thither into a graven, or a molten image, else the loss of it would not have put her into such a passion as caused her quite to forget and break through all the laws of decency and piety. It is a very foolish thing for those that are provoked to throw their curses about as a madman that casteth firebrands, arrows, and death, since they know not, but they may light upon those that are most dear to them. 2. Micah and his mother reconciled. 1. The son was so terrified with his mother's curses that he restored the money. Though he had so little grace as to take it, he had so much left as not to dare to keep it when his mother had sent a curse after it. He cannot believe his mother's money will do him any good without his mother's blessing, nor dares he deny the theft when he is charged with it, nor retain the money when it is demanded by the right owner. It is best not to do evil, but it is next best, when it is done, to undo it again by repentance, confession, and restitution. Let children be afraid of having the prayers of their parents against them, for, though the curse causeless shall not come, yet that which is justly deserved may be justly feared, even though it was passionately and indecently uttered. 2. The mother was so pleased with her son's repentance that she recalled her curses, and turned them into prayers for her son's welfare. Blessed be thou of the Lord, my son. When those that have been guilty of a fault appear to be free and ingenuous in owning it, they ought to be commended for their repentance, rather than still be condemned and upbraided for their fault. 3. Micah and his mother agreeing to turn their money into a god, and set up idolatry in their family, and this seems to have been the first instance of the revolt of any Israelite from God and his instituted worship after the death of Joshua and the elders that outlived him, and is therefore thus particularly related. And though this was only the worship of the true God by an image, against the second commandment, yet this opened the door to the worship of other gods, Baalim, and the groves, against the first and great commandment. Observe. 1. The mother's contrivance of this matter. When the silver was restored, she pretended she had dedicated it to the Lord, verse 3, either before it was stolen, and then she would have this thought to be the reason why she was so much grieved at the loss of it, and imprecated evil on him that had taken it, because it was a dedicated and therefore an accursed thing, or after it was stolen she had made a vow that, if she could retrieve it, she would dedicate it to God, and then she would have the providence that had so far favored her as to bring it back to her hands to be an owning of her vow. Come, said she to her son, the money is mine, but thou hast a mind to it. Let it be neither mine nor thine, but let us both agree to make it into an image for a religious use. Had she put it to a use that was indeed for the service and honor of God, this would have been a good way of accommodating the matter between them, but as it was, the project was wicked. Probably this old woman was one of those that came out of Egypt, and would have such images made as she had seen there. Now that she began to dote, she called to remembrance the follies of her youth, and perhaps told her son that this way of worshipping God by images was, to her knowledge, the old religion. 2. The son's compliance with her. It should seem, when she first proposed the thing he stumbled at it, knowing what the second commandment was, for, when she said, verse 3, she designed it for her son to make an image of, yet he restored it to his mother, being loath to have a hand in making the image, and she gave it to the founder, and had the thing done, blaming him perhaps for scrupling at it, verse 4. But, when the images were made, Micah, by his mother's persuasion, was not only well reconciled to them, but greatly pleased and in love with them. So strangely bewitching was idolatry, and so much supported by traditions received from their parents. 1 Peter 1 verse 18, Jeremiah 44 verse 17. But observe how the old woman's covetousness prevailed, in part, above her superstition. She had wholly dedicated the silver to make the graven and molten images, verse 3, all the 1100 pieces, but, when it came to be done, she made less than a fifth part serve, even 200 shekels, verse 4. She thought that enough, and indeed it was too much to give for an image that is a teacher of lies. Had it been devoted truly to the honor of God, he would not thus have been put off with part of the price, but would have signified his resentment of the affront, as he did in the case of Ananias and Sapphira. Now observe. 1. What was the corruption here introduced? Verse 5. The man Micah had a house of gods, a house of God, so the LXX, for so he thought it, as good as that at Shiloh, and better, because of his own inventing, and at his own disposal, for people love to have their religion under their girdle, to manage it as they please. A house of error, so the Chaldee, for really it was so, a deviation from the way of truth, and an inlet to all deceit. Idolatry is a great cheat, and one of the worst of errors. That which he aimed at in the progress of his idolatry, whether he designed it at first or no, was to mimic and rival both God's oracles and his ordinances. 1. His oracles, for he made teraphim, little images which he might advise with as there was occasion, and receive informations, directions, and predictions from. What the Urim and Thummim were to the prince and people, these teraphim should be to his family, yet he could not think that the true God would own them, or give answers by them, and therefore depended upon such demons as the heathen worship to inspire them, and make them serviceable to him. Thus, while the honor of Jehovah was pretended, verse 3, yet, his institution being relinquished, these Israelites unavoidably lapsed into downright idolatry and demon worship. 2. His ordinances. Some room or apartment in the house of Micah was appointed for the temple or house of God, an ephod, or holy garment, was provided for his priest to officiate in imitation of those used at the tabernacle of God, and one of his sons he consecrated, probably the eldest, to be his priest. And, when he had set up a graven or molten image to represent the object of his worship, no marvel if a priest of his own getting and his own making served to be the manager of it. Here is no mention of any altar, sacrifice, or incense, in honor of these silver gods, but, having a priest, it is probable he had all these, unless we suppose that, at first, his gods were intended only to be advised with, not to be adored, like Laban's teraphim. But the beginning of idolatry, as of other sins, is like the letting forth of water, break the dam, and you bring a deluge. Here idolatry began, and it spread like a fretting leprosy. Dr. Lightfoot would have us observe that as 1,100 pieces of silver were here devoted to the making of an idol, which ruined religion, especially in the tribe of Dan, as we shall presently find, which was Samson's tribe, so 1,100 pieces of silver were given by each Philistine lord for the ruin of Samson. 2. What was the cause of this corruption? Verse 6. There was no king in Israel, no judge or sovereign prince to take cognizance of the setting up of these images, which, doubtless, the country about soon resorted to, and to give orders for the destroying of them, none to convince Micah of his error, and to restrain and punish him, to take this disease in time, by which the spreading of the infection might have been happily prevented. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes, and then they soon did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. When they were without a king to keep good order among them, God's house was forsaken, his priests were neglected, and all went to ruin among them. See what a mercy government is, and what reason there is that not only prayers and intercessions, but giving of thanks, should be made for kings and all in authority. 1 Timothy 2 verses 1 and 2. Nothing contributes more, under God, to the support of religion in the world, than the due administration of those two great ordinances, magistracy and ministry. 7. And there was a young man out of Bethlehem Judah of the family of Judah, who was a Levite, and he sojourned there. 8. And the man departed out of the city from Bethlehem Judah to sojourn where he could find a place, and he came to Mount Ephraim to the house of Micah, as he journeyed. 9. And Micah said unto him, Whence comest thou? And he said unto him, I am a Levite of Bethlehem Judah, and I go to sojourn where I may find a place. 10. And Micah said unto him, Dwell with me, and be unto me a father and a priest, and I will give thee 10 shekels of silver by the year, and a suit of apparel, and thy victuals. So the Levite went in. 11. And the Levite was content to dwell with the man, and the young man was unto him as one of his sons. 12. And Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest, and was in the house of Micah. 13. Then said Micah, Now know I that the Lord will do me good, seeing I have a Levite to my priest. We have here an account of Micah's furnishing himself with a Levite for his chaplain, either thinking his son, because the heir of his estate, too good to officiate, or rather, because not of God's tribe, not good enough. Observe. 1. What brought this Levite to Micah? By his mother's side he was of the family of Judah, and lived at Bethlehem among his mother's relations, for that was not a Levite city, or, upon some other account, as a stranger or inmate, sojourned there. Verse 7. Thence he went to sojourn where he could find a place, and in his travels came to the house of Micah in Mount Ephraim. Verse 8. Now 1. Some think it was his unhappiness that he was under a necessity of removing, either because he was persecuted and abused, or rather neglected and starved, at Bethlehem. God had made plentiful provision for the Levites, but the people withheld their dues, and did not help them into the possession of the cities assigned to them, so that they were reduced to straits, and no care was taken for their relief. Israel's forsaking God began with forsaking the Levites, which therefore they are warned against. Deuteronomy 12 verse 19. It is a sign religion is going to decay when good ministers are neglected and at a loss for a livelihood. But 2. It seems rather to have been his fault and folly, that he loved to wander, threw himself out where he was, and forfeited the respect of his friends, and, having a roving head, would go to seek his fortune, as we say. We cannot conceive that things had yet come to such a pass among them that a Levite should be poor, unless it was his own fault. As those are fit to be pitied that would fix, but may not, so those are fit to be punished that might fix, but will not. Unsettledness being, one would think, a constant uneasiness, it is strange that any Israelite, especially any Levite, should affect it. 2. What bargain Micah made with him. Had he not been well enough content with his son for his priest, he would have gone or sent abroad to inquire out a Levite, but now he only takes hold of one that drops into his hands, which showed that he had no great zeal in the matter. It is probable that this rambling Levite had heard, in the country, of Micah's house of gods, his graven and molten image, which, if he had had anything of the spirit of a Levite in him, would have brought him thither to reprove Micah for his idolatry, to tell how directly contrary it was to the law of God, and how it would bring the judgments of God upon him. But instead of this, like a base and degenerate branch of that sacred tribe, thither he goes to offer his service with, "Have you any work for a Levite? For I am out of business, and go to sojourn where I may find a place." All he aimed at was to get bread, not to do good. Verse 9. Micah courts him into his family, verse 10, and promises him 1. Good preferment, be unto me a father and a priest. Though a young man and taken up at the door, yet, if he take him for a priest, he will respect him as a father, so far is he from setting him among his servants. He asks not for his credentials, takes no time to inquire how he behaved in the place of his last settlement, considers not whether, though he was a Levite, yet he might not be of such a bad character as to be a plague and scandal to his family, but thinks, though he should be ever so great a rake, he might serve for a priest to a graven image, like Jeroboam's priest of the lowest of the people. 1 Kings 12 verse 31. No marvel if those who can make anything serve for a god can also make anything serve for a priest. 2. A tolerable maintenance. He will allow him meat and drink and clothes, a double suit, so the word is in the margin, a better and a worse, one for every day's wear and one for holy days, and 10 shekels, about 25 shillings, a year for spending money, a poor salary in comparison of what God provided for the Levites that behaved well, but those that forsake God's service will never better themselves, nor find a better master. The ministry is the best calling but the worst trade in the world. 3. The Levite's settlement with him, verse 11. He was content to dwell with the man, though his work was superstitious and his wages were scandalous. He objected against neither, but thought himself happy that he had lighted on so good a house. Micah, thinking himself holier than any of his neighbors, presumed to consecrate this Levite, verse 12. As if his building, furnishing, and endowing this chapel authorized him, not only to appoint the person that should officiate there, but to confer those orders upon him which he had no right to give nor the other to receive. And now he shows him respect as a father and tenderness as a son, and is willing thus to make up the deficiency of the coin he gave him. For Micah's satisfaction in this, verse 13. Now know I that the Lord will do me good, that is, he hoped that his new establishment would gain reputation among his neighbors, which would turn to his advantage, for he would share in the profit of his altar, or rather, he hoped that God would countenance and bless him in all he put his hand unto, because I have a Levite to be my priest. 1. He thought it was a sign of God's favor to him and his images that he had so opportunely sent a Levite to his door. Thus those who please themselves with their own delusions, if Providence unexpectedly bring anything to their hands that furthers them in their evil way, are too apt to infer thence that God is pleased with them. 2. He thought now that the error of his priesthood was amended, all was well, though he still retained his graven and molten image. Note, many deceive themselves into a good opinion of their state by a partial reformation. They think they are as good as they should be, because, in some one particular instance, they are not so bad as they have been, as if the correcting of one fault would atone for their persisting in all the rest. 3. He thought the making of a Levite into a priest was a very meritorious act, which really was a presumptuous usurpation, and very provoking to God. Men's pride and ignorance and self-flattery will undertake, not only to justify, but magnify and sanctify the most daring impieties and invasions upon the divine prerogatives. With much reason might Micah have said, Now may I fear that God will curse me, because I have debauched one of his own tribe, and drawn him into the worship of a graven image, yet for this he hopes God will do him good. 4. He thought that having a Levite in the house with him would of course entitle him to the divine favor. Carnal hearts are apt to build too much upon their external privileges, and to conclude that God will certainly do them good because they are born of godly parents, dwell in praying families, are linked in society with those that are very good, and sit under a lively ministry, whereas all this is but like having a Levite to be their priest, which amounts to no security at all that God will do them good, unless they be good themselves, and make a good use of these advantages.